Welcome to Authors of the Pacific Northwest, where we connect authors with new listeners and provide advice to aspiring authors on the business of writing. I'm your host, Vikki J. Carter. So hi there, podcast listeners. Thank you again for coming back to the Authors of the Pacific Northwest. And today we have a treat. We have the wonderful author, Laurie Buchanan, on the show. So Laurie, would you like to say hello to listeners?
Hi, listeners. And Vikki, thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so honored to have you. I'm very excited to talk about your two books and your upcoming book that's coming along. Yes. So listeners don't know this yet, but we're gonna dive in, and you're gonna get to know Laurie, and I think you're gonna have a lot of fun with her. But Laurie, let's get started by getting to know you just a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what state you live in the Pacific Northwest.
I live in the beautiful state of Idaho. I live in Boise, and I live in one of the historic districts here. So it's really cool. I live in a carriage house, a 500 square foot carriage house. And its claim to fame is that it is the oldest still standing building in Boise. It was erected in 1865.
Oh my heavens, I'm going to have to come visit you just to see your house.
Yes.
Yeah, my husband and I haven't been to Idaho that much. I've been enough. As a kid, my parents would go to Idaho often, and I had been to Boise, but that is an awesome home to live in. Lots of history. So wonderful. We live in an almost, I think about in 1 year, our home will be 100 years old. It's a craftsman home.
Oh, nice.
I think it's maybe the third or fourth home that was built in our area. And we have the blessing and privilege of living in it, but it does have its own personality.
I'm sure it does.
Just like any old home. So,
right.
So over in Idaho, share with us a little bit. This is a kind of off the cuff. I don't have many Idaho authors yet. So I'm hoping that, you can inspire some of your author friends to come on the podcast. Share with us something exciting about the state of Idaho. We know a lot about Washington and Oregon, but what's something exciting about Idaho that we need to know about?
Idaho is drop dead gorgeous no matter where you are. And we just finished, my husband and I just finished a 1,200 mile road trip, which was both Montana and Idaho. And I got so many pictures for my Instagram feed. It is, no matter where you look, you can't see anything ugly. We have gorgeous rivers, gorgeous lakes, gorgeous mountains, and the people are friendly. We're a very dog friendly state.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Boise. Yes, and bicycle. We have bicycles like crazy. And believe it or not, we even have wineries in Idaho.
Okay, now you just sold me the dogs and wineries. I have to come over. So all you that are listening, not in the Pacific Northwest, that want to move to Seattle, maybe you need to look at Idaho because it's just as fantastic and there's not as much traffic apparently, right?
Right. Oh, not even, we don't even come close to Seattle. I mean, nothing.
I love it. Because I do vince just a little bit because I live closer to Portland, Oregon, and it's just about as a booming town, right? As much as Seattle is. And I'm like, you guys can all just move somewhere, not in Portland and Seattle. That would be okay. It's just hard to get around.
That's funny.
So, Laurie, what's one thing you would like readers to know about you up front? Now, it doesn't have to be anything about your writing. It doesn't have to, but what's one thing, if you have the listeners that are listening today that might be future readers, what would you like to have them carry away when they remember your name?
Wow, that's a great question.
And it's number one.
It is. I am a person who loves to close the gap between where people are and where they want to be. That's my purpose. That's what I do for a living. That's what my first two books are about. I'm a gap closer. That's what I am.
That. I absolutely love that. And so we'll talk a little bit about what you do for a living, because I did a teeny bit of looking into you and research. And what's really funny is that I'm at that stage where I feel like the podcast has become a life of its own. I don't know if you know much about the history, but a year ago I said I'm going to write a book, started to write my first novel in hopefully a series of 3. And then I started to interview authors because I'm like, well, talk to authors about how did you get published? And then it was like, wow, this is a great podcast. I know nothing about doing a podcast, but I'm going to do one. So then
Good.
My whole life came through the podcast. I'm still working on writing that first book a year later. And I'm at the stage of where, so my listeners, the people they've listened from start to finish, they probably are hearing it. I'm getting a little tired. and just today, before we started, I did a couple of stretching because I have a full day job, and then I go and do what we lovingly call the side hustle, the podcast and the book writing and everything, after a full day work. So the dogs and I were doing some yoga stretching to keep my energies up, and I made my matcha iced latte, and I ran in here to start. So you must be meant for me to help me be re-inspired to keep going.
There you go. And tomorrow on Instagram, I have a picture of me doing yoga with my dog, Willa. So check that out tomorrow on Tuesdays with Laurie.
And now Tuesdays with Laurie, we're going to jump on that. And so everybody that knows me doesn't know, I'm just really starting yoga for the first time in my life. I started, stop. And now I'm dedicated trying to do yoga every day. And I don't have a class I go to, and I'm following some people on TV that I found that I thought were really great. But I'm finding that it's just really energizing. So, Laurie, I'm rambling. Let's talk about your Tuesday with Laurie. Tell us what that is, because I love your Instagram posts. They're so fun.
Tuesdays with Laurie is my website, tuesdayswithlaurie.com, and it's where every Tuesday a blog post goes out. It's short, I believe heavily in concision and brevity. And so I believe also that, a picture tells 1,000 words. So I never post more than 250 words. It's usually much shorter than that, and always with a photograph of my own. Mm-hmm. And then I'll post the same pictures, through the week. I'll post different pictures on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and that type of thing. But on Tuesdays, everything is driven by Tuesdays with Laurie, which is where, people can learn about my books, and people can learn about my values and me as what do I do for a living, a holistic health practitioner. And if somebody wants to be my client, how would they go about it? And it's a takeoff on the book Tuesdays with Maury. So I had to have my intellectual property attorney check with his intellectual property attorney to make sure, because I own my name, Laurie, and Tuesday, the name of the day of the week isn't owned by anybody. And so everybody agreed I could be Tuesdays with Laurie. So that worked out in my favor.
That's super exciting, because when I first saw it, it did remind me of that. And I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's easy to remember, very easy to remember. So that's Tuesdays with Laurie. And it just points to the fact that once a week I am out there on my blog, and it's a fun. I always leave my readers. I have 16,000 subscribers, a little more than 16,000, that get an internal inventory question from me to think about, just a seed thought for the week. And it's fun. I love it. And I always answer my own, if somebody puts a comment out there, I don't have an administrative assistant or anything like that. I answer everybody myself. Same on Twitter, same on, I do it. I don't use Hootsuite. I don't have things, it's me. It's not scheduled. It's me.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. So Laurie, and so listeners, if you are even interested in getting a weekly, energy boost and positive reinforcement, you got to find Laurie's Instagram, because I found, she found me, everybody. Laurie came and found Vikki.
I did.
She did. And I'm enjoying it. It's really wonderful. Can you explain to me and the listeners what I can't say it right.
Holistic health practitioner.
Yes. Kind of give us a definition.
Yes. An HHP, a holistic health practitioner, is somebody who works not just on the physical aspect of a person. It's a holistic, a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. So an MD is going to look after, what symptoms do you have? Mm-hmm. I'm sneezing, I'm itching, I'm whatever. And they're going to give you something, most likely a prescription that's going to address the sneeze or the itching. Mm-hmm. A holistic health practitioner, and, we pay attention to the physical too, but we want to go to the source. Mm-hmm. And we're not alternative, we're integrative. So alternative practitioners, and there are alternative practitioners. I'm a holistic health practitioner. I'm not. An alternative medicine is going to say, do this instead of that. Take my recommendation, not Dr. MD. Mm-hmm. I am going to say, absolutely, I'm going to work with your physician, and we're going to work together. You're going to do this and a holistic approach, both. So it's integrative medicine. It's complementary. These two, traditional Western medicine and holistic health practitioners, they work together hand in glove, and we like each other very much.
I love that. So before we got on the call, I was just sharing with you just a teeny bit about my youngest daughter and some of the health scenarios. Didn't even really think that you would have been tuned into what I was saying a little bit. And she's going through her own scenarios with wonderful, wonderful specialists. But I've always been under the idea that we need to look at everything, including her diet and her nutrition and, spiritual and exercise and all of it.
Absolutely. And what are her emotions? Is she, upset? Is she happy? Is she, where is she on the emotional scale? Because there's so many emotions, and that's usually our emotions are driven by something that's going on internally. So our mental is what we think. Our emotions are how we feel. And we know that, for instance, we just talked about dogs. Dogs experience life through their noses. Everything is through their nose. Humans experience life through their feelings. And, we need to pay attention to these feelings. And these feelings can tell us a lot about what's going on physically, what's going on in our mind, not just our heart. Our heart is our emotion. And spiritually too. Are there some holes that need to be plugged? Is there, what is it? And it's not even just, there were some people that might say, well, Laurie, I'm an atheist or I'm an agnostic, and that's fine too. It's then, if that's the case, what is your highest and best self missing? We'll put you at the top of the totem pole. And what is lacking there? And we take a look at that. So in a very long roundabout way, that's what an HHP, holistic health practitioner, does.
That's wonderful. So, and do you work are you independent? Do you have your own office clinic, or do you work in a practice with other traditional practitioners?
So when we've lived in Boise for 5 years. Before we moved here, I had a brick and mortar facility in Crystal Lake, Illinois, which is just north of Chicago, for about 12 years. And when we moved here, I went from actually hands-on work with my clients to FaceTime, and we work that way. So I've shifted, even though I still take care of a lot of HHP stuff, it's more of the life coaching now.
I love that. That's wonderful.
So people will say, well, what are the most common things that people want from you? Well, the most common things, if someone's going to hire me, typically it's going to be a female. Typically the person either A, wants to lose weight. That's the number one thing, wants to lose weight. And number two is, I hate my job and I want to work for myself. I want to be self-employed. And number three is, I'm being held hostage in a relationship. I can't stand him or her. I don't know how to get out of it. So those are probably the top three things. I mean, there's a myriad, but basically if I'm getting an email or a phone call from somebody, I can pretty much put money that it's going to be
in those three categories. How absolutely wonderful. So listeners I don't talk a lot about my journey outside of the writing process on the podcast, but in this last year, I started a healthy journey. And my listeners probably know this because I do tend to bring on people that mirror the things I'm going through or I've discovered. So it kind of helps a little bit. But I would say about 3 years ago, I started on the journey of true healthiness just for me and started weight loss, and then really got serious. Had an amazing health coach that helped me about 8 months ago, lost a significant amount of weight, but she taught me how to do it correctly for life. And really, she also taught me my relationship with food, and also, just having a balance. It's just been a life-changing, just huge difference for me. And so, but it also, we really did a lot of talking about the internal and how we look at ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. And we talked about the spiritual and we talked about all that. All those things are so tied in. It doesn't matter if you're looking to, I don't feel like if you're looking to change your job or you're looking to lose weight or you change your relationship, you have to look inward a little bit too.
Oh, absolutely.
What's going on?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So this kind of segues really nicely into your two books that you have written. And so share with us the titles and kind of share with us a little bit of the premise about that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about your writing process.
Absolutely. Okay, so the first book is Note to Self, A 7-Step Path to Gratitude and Growth. And it came out in November of 2017. And since that time, it has won 6 awards, including the one I'm most proud of. It won the Forward Indie Self-Help Book of the Year. So that was a pretty big deal.
Fantastic. That's huge because there's plenty of indie self-help.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And this one is designed to help the reader close the gap between where they are and where they want to be. Mm-hmm. And book number 2 is The Business of Being, Soul Purpose in and Out of the Workplace. And it came out in July of 2018, so not quite a year ago. It's won 2 awards so far, and it shows readers how to thrive soul side out in and out of the workplace. It's a fun book. I have recipes in there. It's a fun book. And then I'm working on, I did a 180-degree shift, and I'm now working on a nonfiction book, fiction book, that comes out in August of 2020. And it is the book 1 in a series. It's a suspense thriller that takes place in the Pacific Northwest. Ooh. In fact, it's in Fairhaven, just outside of Bellingham, Washington. Mm-hmm. And it's a psychological thriller about a sociopath who takes on the persona of a writer and goes to a writing retreat.
Oh. Okay, so I'm hooked already, and we're going to bring you back when that one's done so you could share that one with us. That's very, very exciting.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. So let's backtrack a little bit on the first 2 books that are your nonfiction books. Mm-hmm. I absolutely love the topics. Like I said, people get drawn to me, and I tend to bring them on the podcast because it's kind of like where I'm at as authors. I just interviewed a gal who has a book called A Year of Living Kindly, and she's going to be on, and she'll actually be on a couple weeks, listeners, after Laurie's on. So it seems like the month that your podcast.
Yes. Is that
positive?
Donna? Is that Donna?
It is Donna. Yes.
Yeah, I know Donna. I love her. She asked me before the book came out, would I read it and give her an author endorsement blurb?
Oh, I love it. Well,
it is let me just put in a plug for her.
Yes, please do.
This is a phenomenal book that takes you a year. You can read it really fast if you want, but it is a bite a day that is absolutely phenomenal. It is what I call PUC, positive, uplifting, constructive, and healing. Those are the metrics that I live by. And that her book fits the bill.
And it's astonishing. So listeners, while you're listening to Laurie and I talk about Donna's book, just know it's going to be out after this podcast in 2 weeks. And what's really astonishing is that, so Donna came on and we had this amazing discussion about kindness. And it's something that I'm so drawn to, and I want to live my life kindly. And, but I didn't have the identification of that's really what it was. And then Donna just landed just like you did, found me and said, I want to be on the podcast. I brought her on, started to record. And so I just got her book. She sent me a copy of the book and I'm reading it. And just a few podcasts ago, I had Philip Kinney on, and he wrote a book called The Writer's Crucible. And he's a psychotherapist, and he's also an author. And he went through the stages that authors or creatives go through when it comes to self-doubt and being able to free yourself from those constrictions to be able to write well. And so I've just been like in this year of awakening, I guess you can say.
Yes, yes.
One part about your second book, your title, and I want to talk a little bit about this, about living your life fully in work and outside of work. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about that? And then I'll share with you the reason why I asked that.
Yes.
And so go ahead and start there, and then we'll come back to the reason why I asked that.
Okay. Many people, and this isn't true necessarily for everybody, but when I was in the corporate world years ago, it is in some work situations difficult to be authentic. It's difficult to be yourself. You have to go to work with kind of a mask on and be what your pay is based on. For instance, I'll use myself as an example.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
We had annual reviews, and we had to multitask. It was the thing, and you had to talk about multitasking, how you multitask, that you love to multitask, that you love to have your left hand on fire, your right hand on fire, your hair on fire, and your behind on fire.
Yes.
And so I had to pretend that was how I thrive. Well, anybody who knows anything about me happens to know that I'm a Buddhist, and we do one thing at a time. We focus, and we do one thing at a time extraordinarily well. Yet here I was at work saying, yes, sir, 3 bags full, when in fact, I was focused. They loved my work. I always hit the pay grades, but I was not telling the truth. That wasn't very nice, but I was doing exceptionally well, doing it my way, but having to say that I was multitasking when in fact I was not. So that's just one example of having to maybe you have to be a team player when in fact you are a person who works best by yourself, but you have to step out of your zone. So this book helps people to be themselves, be transparent, be authentic, not get fired at all, but
which is a plus.
Exactly. And be soul side out, meaning your true self is out there. Your highest and best self is at work. And you can tell the truth the whole entire time and not get fired. And that's kind of where this book goes.
What a beautiful, beautiful concept, honestly. And it's something Donna and I talked a little bit about, also kindness in work, because she goes to corporate America and she talks about bringing kindness into work. So do you get the opportunity to take that message into organizations and talk with them about it? Because I do feel that is something that is not necessarily addressed well in our human resources departments.
Absolutely, I do. I get brought in as a consultant sometimes, as a speaker for the whole general population. When I was in the corporate world, I was in HR, I was in recruiting. So I know where to go, who to talk to. When I go into a corporate situation, I know who are the string pullers and who has the leverage. So yes, I get that opportunity, and it's a wonderful opportunity.
Well, bravo. And I think that's a much needed conversation to have. And it doesn't matter, I think, what industry there it is. I'm in higher ed, and I love being in higher ed. I love working with students and seeing the transformation that comes from education. But then again, we have our metrics that we have to hit. I mean, there's no organization that doesn't have some sort of measurements. And I struggle with measurements in the sense that, and this is kind of part of the story. I struggle with measurements in the sense when it's just a metric and we don't look at the entire picture of the person or the situation. Especially in higher ed, it's a real challenge when you're working with adult students because there's multifacets. Anybody that has had any higher ed background with adult students knows, there's a whole theory around it. And so I work for one of the most leading, amazing universities, but still we're caught up sometimes in those things. And I had to get to a place after 6 years of balance of where I was working myself to death, trying to, get up to that ladder to the highest level I thought that I needed to be at in my education and in my career. And it wasn't literally after several failures. And we're talking almost getting fired failures.
Right.
Because I dug my toes and said, I will not operate this way. I cannot work with people the way you're asking me to work with them because it goes against everything I believe in. And that message wasn't received well. And so I almost was on the brink of being ushered out. Thank goodness I wasn't, and I still get to stay where I'm at working with students. But I think that message needs to be shared everywhere, that we have to be authentic who we are. And then for us to figure out how to operate in that authenticity.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So for me, my magic, so everybody will know, about that year ago when I woke up, I was striving for everything. And all of a sudden my darling husband looked at me and said, because I was deciding, am I going to go back to, do my doctorate? I'm kind of bored. I need to do something. I want to, maybe move up and work some more, try something else. And he goes, why don't you just write? You're just a brilliant writer. Why don't you just spend all that energy there? And it was that aha moment that I can do my work day and be fulfilled there, but then I can do something else. And the writing and the podcast has brought that life and joy to me.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. I love hearing that.
Yeah, it's the creative part. So let's talk a little about the first book. So the first book has not a workplace environment necessarily. So kind of encapsulates for us what the first book is about.
I work a lot on the premise of color, and color therapy is something that an HHP, holistic health practitioner, is going to pull into. It's in their bag of tricks, and people don't realize that every single thing has a vibration. Every single thing, whether it's a desk or whether it's a fan or whether it's a human being or whatever, a plant, it doesn't matter. And every single thing has a color. And we can tell the difference between pink, blue, green, red, orange, based on the speed at which that energy hits the rods and cones in our eyes. And that affects us. It affects our internal organs. It affects our glands. It affects our nervous system. It affects everything. So most people have heard of color therapy. And, when I was in the business world, when I was in the corporate world, one of our clients was Sony. And we would have them come in often, and we had to wear our power suits on the Sony.
Oh, yes. I had some of those I put away.
Yes.
Yes. Such many more.
Yes. And those for the women, power suits were red. And that was important. And we were conveying, without saying a word, this strength and so on and so forth. For a writer, one of the best colors that they can use, it's a color that really unleashes creativity and blossoms inspiration, is blue. And it's any of the shades of blue, whether it is
fantastic.
Sky blue or turquoise blue, indigo. Blue is fantastic for that. And I talk about, green is for self-love and other love and so forth. And so the chapters are broken down based on colors and how we can use colors. It's not only just that, but there's a tremendous focus on color and how we can incorporate it in our world, in our personal world, whether we want to boost something up or woe something down. And so, if you've got stomach issues, let's say somebody has horrific stomach issues, yellow is phenomenal for working with stomach issues, and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, that's how the chapters are broken down.
I love it. Well, that's interesting because in my office where I do all my writing, my work, my podcast, I have lots of blue. I'm so drawn to blue. I always say it's because of the ocean. I'm drawn to the ocean itself, and anything to do with the ocean. I tell my husband I'm a landlocked mermaid. I need to be by water.
There you go.
Unless I'm by water. So I did a lot of blue accents in my office, and that's interesting that I didn't know that.
And see, but on some level you did.
I must have.
That's what that eases you. It's therapeutic for you. So when you go into this room and shut the door, or leave the door open, or however it is that you work, you decorated that to soothe your soul, to prime the pump. And that's wonderful. So somewhere you may not have known, the color blue helps writing, but you knew that blue is soothing and therapeutic for yourself.
It is. Yeah. How fascinating. I love it. Well, let's talk a little bit about your writing process, because it sounds like to me, your 2 books that you have, but you can jump on also the fiction book you're working on, have come out just organically from your working environment. Is that kind of how that process?
Absolutely. The first 2 came from that. And then, as I mentioned, I happen to be Buddhist. Most of us are sweet, loving, kind, and thoughtful. Yes. And it's just fun every now and then to be mean, ugly, vile, and vicious. And I can do that in a story. So I get to kill people, and I've had my, if anybody were to look at my research history on my laptop and look up, how do you kill someone with a garrote? How do you poison someone without letting the hospital? Oh my gosh. But I'm having a blast because in my normal real life situation, it's this, sweet, loving, kind, and thoughtful. Yeah. And then I get to be mean, ugly, vile, and vicious, and, live through the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. They're very similar, yet they're different. Yeah. But I get to kind of take on that persona, and I'm having a blast doing it. But my writing process is one, I teach at UW-Madison. I teach at the Writers Institute there. And this is one thing that I share with people is if you, first of all, treat writing as a business. Don't treat it as anything other than a business. So you need to block out time on your calendar like you would have a dentist appointment or, any other professional appointment. You schedule your time and you honor that. You show up. You don't say, oh, it's just my writing. No, you treat it as a business. So when you come in, or when I come into my writing studio, the first thing that I do, I clear my desk. The only thing on my desk is twofold. My phone goes in my drawer. It's turned off and it's tucked in my drawer, so I cannot be distracted by that. And I have a little thing that holds a tea light. And I've discovered that the Yankee brand of tea light candles burn just about 6 hours, maybe just depending on the flavor. I usually burn Macintosh because I love the smell of apples. But anyway, I light that. And that is my sacred contract to myself to keep my butt in the chair until that tea light goes out of its own volition.
I love that. That's fantastic.
Exactly. And so if I get like, oh, I can't stand this, I'm hitting my head against the wall, I look at that flame and I remind myself that was a promise. So I schedule that time for, I know I can't be interrupted. I won't be interrupted because I schedule my time for that. I'm not having a client call. I schedule it for when I'm not going to go, okay, I need to vacuum first and then the dishes have to be clean. Because if we kowtow to those things, we won't write. So I make this flame something that's visible. I see it and I just work until that flame goes out. And that's my process. It's a commitment to excellence. It's a commitment to myself. I never spend time. I invest time. When we spend time, it's like spending money. We usually don't have something to show for it. When we invest our money, we're expecting an ROI, a return on investment. So my writing, I treat it as a business and I'm expecting an ROI on it.
I love that, Laurie. And you must have needed to tell me that today because it's something that I'm struggling with. It's not finding the time that I'm struggling. It's finding that in that realization. I know I'm investing in myself in writing this books and working with my writers group and editing them, and working on the podcast is a total investment for me. I have always told everybody this podcast is a labor of love for me, but it's also very selfish because I'm gleaning so much information from amazing authors.
Well, and that's brilliant. That is cutting edge, bleeding edge, brilliant on your part.
Yeah. Well, it just came out of need. And then I thought, I can't keep this all to myself. I would just explode. So the podcast came out of that as well. And but I love the idea of the candle, or making that commitment to yourself and knowing that there is going to be an investment, there's going to be a return on that investment.
Yes.
It's something my husband is everybody, when they finally meet him someday, they're going to say, you are so amazing. But he is, because he always tells me when I'm getting at that tired point, because when you're doing so much, you do get burnt out and tired. Sometimes you have to pause and talk about it and work that out. And he always tells me, in 10 years, when your books are out and your podcast is so huge, he gives me all that, because you're going to look back and remember how tired you were, but it's going to be worth every bit of it.
Absolutely. He's right. And he sounds wonderful.
He is wonderful. I'm keeping him, everyone, just so you know. But he's an artist as well. He's a musician and he's lived the life. So he knows the ropes, and he's watching me go through that. So, So Laurie, let's talk about your publication journey. So are your books, you said that they were indie. So tell us kind of how that got started, who you're published through as far as independent, and what's your advice for individuals like me? Because I'm leaning towards a specific independent group for publishing.
Okay. I love to talk about my publisher. I'm a hybrid publisher. I'm a hybrid author. So She Writes Press is my publisher. And in fact, I need to give them a plug because they just won They're the first hybrid publisher to ever win the Next Generation Indie Book Awards, and they took it away in 2019, Publisher of the Year.
Yeah.
So if anybody's looking for a publisher, a hybrid publisher, She Write Press, I highly recommend. Now, they are a hybrid is the exact same as going through a tradition. You have to be vetted just like you would a traditional publisher, but you are going to absorb some of the cost up front. And so, but you also get more of the return. So every time a book sells, instead of getting 17 cents, or I just made that up, but this little amount from, big number A publisher, traditional publisher, you get more of it because you've invested in yourself. Again, it's an investment. You're not spending money, you're investing. So I published my first book. They took me on. They vetted me completely. They took me on. The second one I had to pitch again. They took me on. I pitched the third one that's coming out in August 2020. I had to still pitch it. They don't just assume that you're wonderful.
Exactly.
And they vetted me again. And then I'm working on so the first one, the name of the series is Creative Quill. That's the name of the writing retreat. And the first one is Indelible. The one I'm working on now is called Iconoclast. And so they will be the publisher. I can't imagine that they would say no for book number 2. So I will say that they're going to be the publisher.
We'll put it out there with belief because
they are wonderful. About 18 months in advance. If you want something out like right now, you probably don't want to work with She Writes Press. Yeah. You have about an 18-month lead time with them, so that you have this huge timeline that you print out and you put up on your wall. And this is what happens 18 months in advance. Okay, now do this. This is 17 months in advance. Now
this sounds super great though.
Oh yeah. And you have to hit these. And if you don't, you get an email from whoever your project manager is or Brooke Warner, who is the editor and publisher there. And so you're hitting these things that have to occur. And you don't want them to slip through the cracks. And it's wonderful. They're truly, truly a partner. And I love being an SWP, a She Writes Press. And not only do you get to work with them, all of the people, it's women, all of the women who've gone before you, we have a secret page on Facebook and we can ask each other questions. Did you do books on the train in New York? Was it worth your investment? Did you do this? Did you do that? Was it worth your investment? I found out about you through the secret page.
I know. And that's what's so funny because I have a secret dream of coming to She Writes. Because I was I was introduced by a fellow author. She came on the podcast and just talked because I've been interviewing everybody. I want to know about hybrid. I want to know about independent. I want to know about traditional publishing because I'm a librarian by nature and by trade, and so I can't help myself but do all this research. And I've heard so many things about all different avenues and ways of going. And I think that it's an individual, personal process. Right?
Yes.
I have several authors that I know are good friends of mine that started out with independent publishing on their own, and then they decided that they wanted to rewrite those books and work with an agent and editor, and they're doing that, and they're having a great experience. And I've had people that have had terrible experiences on all sorts of ends as well.
Yes.
And so, but I have a secret dream of coming to She Writes because all the authors I've talked to, I'm just dying.
And we absolutely love each other. I mean, we encourage each other. If somebody, takes a hit, maybe they got a 1-star review or somebody just ripped them to shreds. We go and we are like whales that lift up the whale that's not having a good time, and we just help each other. And it's wonderful. So you've got this whole sisterhood that's really, it's vital to me. And we help each other. So yes, that has been my journey.
Well, that is a reason I can honestly feel that I can say this without even talking to the editors or getting to know them or anything. That has to be a reason why they won the prestigious award that they won because it's, in my mind, I'm growing really to believe that authors, we tend to write alone, but it's not supposed to be a lonely process, and the journey is not supposed to be on your own. A, it's supposed to be a journey, and B, you're supposed to do with others. And you have to have that community of others. And I wasn't I wouldn't say I wasn't a believer in that. I was scared of that process until a really great writer group in my community who have they've done amazing things in our area. They heard about me. I had a few of them on my podcast. And I literally started out in my community. Nobody knew that I was a writer. They knew I worked for higher ed. They knew me as a librarian, but they had no idea I was a writer and that I was going to do a podcast. So I started to bring them on and started to get into the community. The one thing about me is I've lived in this community my whole life, and my whole life I wanted to leave. And I realized that I have to build the community that I need around me and not leave and go look for this community. And the minute that happened, everything got opened up. And I met amazing people online, in my community, just amazing.
Right. Yeah. And it was happened because you shifted your perspective.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, it was such a pronounced shift, because you can ask anybody that knew me prior to this. I was going to move to Hawaii. I was going to move to Seattle. My husband and I were going to raise our kids. We were going to ditch this area. We were out of here. We had opportunities our whole married life to move to Nashville because of his music, and we never did. And I was very angry that I was still in this community. And I finally just said, okay, universe, what are you trying to tell me? There is something here you need me to stay here to do or figure out, and I better figure that out. And then when I opened the door to the idea of the creative part of my writing, and I started to say I'm a writer, and then I started to go out in the community myself and start to embrace others and talk with them and share with them, and they share with me. And then I realized I've been fighting a community or looking for something that has always been here. I just never saw it.
Right.
Yeah. So anyways, therapy session with Vikki apparently today once again. So I love it. So tell us, do you have a PR specialist, or are you doing it all on your own as far as the marketing outside of She Writes Prep?
I do it both. I do both. So what I can't do myself, I hire Book Sparks. It's under the umbrella. She Writes Press and Book Sparks. They're under the same umbrella. But you don't have to. When you are writing for She Writes Press, you can use whoever you want. But I love the idea of it being in-house. So I ask them to do things that I cannot do for myself. I can do an awful lot for myself. I'm pretty technically savvy. I'm darn good with several things that I'm a social media machine.
You're one of those authors I don't have to worry about explaining how to get
I know how to do that, and I enjoy doing that. Now, if I didn't know how or I didn't enjoy it, that would be something I would ask them to do for me. I do my own website. I do that stuff. But there are maybe some. So I write for several newspapers and several magazines. But there were some magazines I personally couldn't get my foot in their door. So that was something I wanted to, I couldn't get into, for instance, Aspire magazine, and I wanted to get into Aspire, and now I'm in Aspire. So that's great. That type of thing. And the visibility that they've gotten me has led to an opportunity up in your neck, a little higher than your neck of the woods. I'm going to be doing a workshop at the Write on the Sound conference in Edmonds, Washington this year in October. So I'm going to be teaching the basics of building your author brand and social media presence. So if you have any people that live in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, that are up in that neck of the woods in October, I highly recommend, not just for me, but Write on the Sound. When you see the lineup, Robert Dugoni's one of the people. I love reading his books, the suspense thriller mystery books. He's going to be speaking there. I'm speaking there. There are probably 20 speakers. And again, my workshop is going to be the basics of building your author brand and social media presence.
I love it, Laurie. Such a great workshop.
Yeah. And the visibility came about though from Book Sparks. That wasn't something I could get myself. Because I'm from the Midwest, I still go and teach at UW-Madison all the time, but teaching in the Pacific Northwest wasn't something that living in the Midwest could do for me. So there is something, and again, it's not spending money with Book Sparks, it's investing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
This is so funny you say that word, because after I met my first She Writes, I'm just plugging She Writes. I'm sorry, listeners, but this is the metamorphosis has happened in the last couple of months after I met my first author. I looked it up, and then I told my husband, I go, I think I know where I'm going to go publishing wise. He goes, really? You finally figured it out after all these interviews? And I go, well, I hope I figured it out. But I go, it's going to be an investment up front. He goes, well, wouldn't your doctorate have been an investment up front? And I go,
Yes.
yeah. And he goes, so what would the difference be? And I go, well, the long-term gain for me is much better in my mind.
Right. But, that's brilliant of him to ask you. And it is, again, it's an investment. Anything we do, again, don't spend your time, invest your time. Don't spend your money, invest your money. So that's great that he sounds like a wonderful sounding board.
He's
and
great.
I highly,
everything.
that's fantastic. And any listeners who are thinking about where to pitch a book, She Writes Press. That's my experience, and I give it a 12 on a scale of 1 to 10. Well,
I'm a believer, so we'll see if I can get the guts up to do it. And that's my thing, is I got to get the courage, right? So I'll make sure that listeners, that Laurie's information is on show notes so that you can follow her website, get on her mailing list, and you can hear about when she's at that conference. I'm making a commitment to go to a couple more conferences in the Northwest area, so that because I have met so many authors, but I haven't met everybody face to face, and so many are at conferences that I need to get myself to them so that I can see everybody. So that's one that I'm going to put on my radar for October. Now, it depends on when in October, because if it's during the week of Halloween, it's a no-go for me.
It's the first week. It's early. I don't have the dates right in front of me. Actually, I do.
That's okay.
But it's the first week, yeah.
Halloween's a huge deal at my house. I'm going to reveal this to everybody. I'm doing a Star Wars theme this year.
Ooh.
Last year I was a living live mermaid in a gigantic seashell. It was glorious. My husband did all these lights, and we had.
Oh my gosh!
But this year I may be hiring Star Wars troopers to come, and we're going to have the Death Star in the front, and we have over 1,000 kids come trick or treat at our house.
Oh my gosh!
Of my life, and our whole neighborhood. And so I'm going to try to get our neighborhood to do a block party at the same time.
Oh my gosh!
I also have a vision of maybe putting some money, having everybody donate money on my block for like Make-A-Wish Foundation or something like that.
Yes.
So that's what I've been working on. So Halloween week is out for me. I would be writing, but you can guarantee I'll be out in front on Halloween night as Princess Leia, a version or so.
Oh, how fun. Oh my gosh.
It's so much fun. And that will be on social media, I can guarantee, because I post things on there about that. So let's wrap up. And before you start your reading, and you have so much fabulous energy, Laurie, and I'm wondering, what's your inspiration, and can you share what that might be for us?
The inspiration is to make what I call PUC, positive, uplifting, constructive, and healing impression in my sphere, whatever my little corner of the world is. That's really important to me. If you think in terms of wet cement and putting your thumbprint in wet cement, I want to make mine, because every one of us, we contribute something, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, we contribute something. Mm-hmm. And I want my energy, the space that I take up, to be positive, uplifting, constructive, and healing. And that's what drives me. It really is, whether I'm, just with my family, or with people I do teaching that I don't know, or with clients. It is to be the best version of me that there can possibly be, and to help people close the gap.
Let me ask you this tail-end question to this, because I'm curious. Do you ever get to the place of where, I can imagine you're human, that you have to recharge, and you've given so much that you have to take a step back and say, I need to recharge? Because absolutely.
That was what this we just got back 2 days ago from this road trip, and it was just my husband and I and our dog. She's a big Irish Wolfhound. It was just the three of us, and I take hermitages. I call them hermitages, and I go away, whether it's to. I've gone to the Bahamas before, to Eleuthera Island, and just taken time 2 months ago, I was in San Diego completely by myself. I know to feed me because sometimes, depending on who you are and what you do for a living, it's sort of like being a piece of hamburger thrown into a piranha bowl. And people, you're there for them to take, but you have to be able to recharge. And I'm all about self-care. Absolutely.
I love it. And I'm learning that process because I've always been very giving. I'll give till the point of where I'm just burnt to death out, exhausted. But I love to give and share and help. And it's with my students and my family and with authors now all around me. But it was funny just the other week, my husband's like, noticed I was getting a little ran down. I go, I think I need a beach trip. I think I need to not take my laptop except for writing. I'm not going to, log on. I'm going to block some time out and I just need to go to the beach and just recharge.
Right.
Yeah. So it's good. I'm glad you shared that with me because I feel your energy while you're talking. I'm like, does she ever get tired?
Yes, I do.
Because I do. I'm tired almost every afternoon.
Yes.
The little bit of yoga stretching and stuff. So why don't you take us into the section you're going to read for us? I'm going to go quiet while you do that reading. And then at the end, we will close out the podcast. So share with us what you want to share with us prior to that reading around the concept or the idea before you start.
Okay, I'm going to read to you. I'm going to start on page 127 of The Business of Being. And this is a chapter called You Are the Company You Keep. And I think it'll be self-explanatory once we get going. Are you ready for me to start?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I opened the chapter with a quote that I love from Edmund Lee. And for those of the listeners who aren't familiar with Edmund Lee, he's a social media strategist, an entrepreneur, a speaker, and an author. And his quote is, "Surround yourself with the dreamers and the doers, the believers and thinkers, but most of all, surround yourself with those who see greatness within you, even when you don't see it yourself." So on that note, I'm going to start reading. For a moment, think of yourself as a business. In our personal lives, personal branding is the counterpart of market segmentation and targeting in the business arena. I remember the first time I heard the saying, guilty by association. It came in the form of a warning from my parents. I don't know if it prevented me from continuing with my plans, but the spirit of the adage has remained with me. The people we surround ourselves with reflect our values, and impressions of us are developed based on our actions and inactions. Good, bad, or indifferent, we're judged by what we say, what we do, what we fail to do, and the people we associate with. In their book, Millennial Reboot, Our Generation's Playbook for Professional Growth, authors Kate Athmer and Rob Johnson shared some of the best, most succinct advice I've ever read that can be applied to our business and personal lives. Quote, "Don't be a dick," end quote. They follow that with recognize when it's you who's being the asshole, which is the perfect segue to personal branding. The term personal branding is thought to have been first used and discussed in a 1997 article by Tom Peters. Cultivating a personal brand, how you appear to the world, is just as important today as it was then. Even more so because in today's high-tech world, we leave a digital footprint viewed by family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, and depending on your security settings, people we don't even know. Personal branding isn't about tooting our own horn. It's about being the best version of ourselves. It's about being a person who adds value and is authentic, mindful, and relevant. A person who's intentional about their trademark, a poster child for the values they embrace. How do you conduct your life? What are your parameters? What are your ethics and practices? What will you become involved in? What will you refrain from becoming involved in? According to a survey conducted by the Glenn Lopez Group, less than 15% of leaders have defined their personal brands, and less than 5% are consistently personifying them. Why? Perhaps it's because it can be extremely challenging and requires a tremendous amount of self-awareness, action, and accountability. Many people's personal brand include the practice of excellence, When I was a young girl, I desperately wanted to play the piano. I can remember begging my parents for piano lessons, and then came the wonderful day when they acquiesced and said yes. The piano phase of my young life was short-lived because I didn't realize that playing the piano involved practicing the piano. I mistakenly expected instant gratification, but it didn't happen in the blink of an eye, and there were no shortcuts in sight. There are a multitude of things we can practice: various sports, musical instruments, writing, yoga, law, singing, meditation, art, selfless service, medicine, and relationships, to name but a few. The people I find myself drawn to are the people who practice excellence, who embrace the practice as the place of transformation. In this mindset, they regard life as their practice, and practice as their life. They view everything they encounter through the lens of love. To become exceptionally good at something, we have to practice every single day. To be a master, we have to make it a way of life. Practice is the way we move forward. Once we get there, it's the way we stay. In yoga, abhyasa is having an attitude of persistent effort to attain and maintain a state of stable tranquility. Slow, steady change, breath by breath, asana to asana, still point to still point, until it becomes fluid, efficient, and second nature. As an adult, I show up for practice, life, in a meaningful way. I choose to live on purpose. The funny thing is, it doesn't feel like practice. It feels like uncovering, discovering, and learning. Over the years, I've learned that practice, life, can be messy. It's here we learn from our mistakes. I've also learned that practice, life, can be cooperative and noisy. It's here we learn from each other. Purposeful practice keeps it all moving forward toward greater clarity and mastery. And I'll stop there.
Laurie, I am so energized and inspired, and I do believe you're meant for me today, but I do hope that my listeners, there was others that felt the same way by listening to that. So thank you so much for sharing that. And more importantly, thank you for sharing yourself in your books.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it.
And we will have you back when you get your fiction book written. And
okay.
I want you back for that so we can share that journey with you too. And listeners, don't forget about in October, if you can make it to that conference, you definitely go to Laurie's workshop and make sure you say, hey, I heard you on Vikki's podcast, because I think that's a lot of fun. And I'll try to get myself there too as well. Thank you for listening to the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode as much as we did. Follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter, where you can be entered automatically each month to win a signed free copy of a book from an author that's appeared on the podcast. You can find out more at our website, www.squishpen.com. And finally, if you're an author in the Pacific Northwest and you would like to appear on the show, you can find out more on our website. So until next week, I hope you enjoy the journey. This is Vikki J. Carter signing off.